My parents didn't just skip my wedding, they erased it. No call, no excuse, no text. Just 3 empty chairs staring back at me while I promised forever to a woman they'd never bothered to meet. 2 years later, they finally remembered I existed. Not because they missed me, but because they saw my 135K Porsche glinting on Instagram. Then came the call. "Asher, we need to talk. Family meeting. Tomorrow." Her voice was calm, too calm, like she'd practiced it in the mirror. I said yes, but this time I wasn't coming home to beg for love. I was coming to end the silence and bring a surprise they'd never forget. Before I share my story, I want to know you're here with me. Just say listening in the comments or tell me where you're from. I love hearing how far my story reach. Sometimes even the smallest connection can make a story feel heard. Thank you. And now, here's my story. If my story touches, you don't forget to subscribe. Every story here comes from a real place, pain, truth, and the courage to rise again. I'm Asher Vale, and this is how I stopped waiting to be chosen. The vineyard smelled like summer and champagne, like everything was supposed to be perfect. I walked down the aisle that afternoon in Napa Valley believing I had it all: success, love, a future. But right there in the front row, 3 empty chairs waited for ghosts who never came. My parents, my brother, the family I had been raised to serve but could never please. I kept my smile steady for the cameras, though every step felt heavier. Guests whispered, "He's so strong," as if strength was what you call someone too numb to cry. I looked at Ria waiting for me at the altar, the only face that didn't flinch under the weight of my absence. When we exchanged vows, I saw the sunlight hit those chairs again, 3 voids carved into the happiest day of my life. At the reception, laughter filled the air, the kind that belongs to people who never learned what silence costs. Ria's father raised a toast to the family who shows up. Everyone clapped. I smiled too, because that's what you do when the truth hurts louder than applause. Later, when the lights dimmed and the music softened, I walked out toward the vineyards. The air was colder there, heavy with the smell of wet earth. I thought maybe I could make peace with it, pretend their absence was freedom, that I didn't need them to see me. But when I looked through the wedding photos, their absence wasn't freedom. It was a funeral I hadn't planned to attend. The videographer later told me he'd waited until the ceremony started before giving up on the Vale family guests. They never called, never canceled, just disappeared. That night I found a gift left by an old friend from Asheville. Inside the box was a photo of my family, Dad, Mom, Dorian, and a torn space where my own face used to be. The edges were jagged, deliberate. It looked like proof that I'd been erased. I sat on the hotel balcony staring at that picture until dawn. Somewhere between exhaustion and clarity, I made a silent vow I would keep going, build a life worth remembering, even if no one from my own bloodline would ever witness it. I told myself I'd wait for one sign, just one phone call, one apology to believe they cared. Months passed. No call came. 2 years later, on a gray Sunday morning, I posted a photo of my new Porsche 911 Turbo S metallic silver sunlight glinting off the hood. The caption read, "Dreams don't need witnesses." It wasn't about the car. It was about proof that I could exist loudly without them. 3 hours later, my phone rang. The screen flashed Mom. 5 years of silence broken by a voice as rehearsed as a voicemail. "Asher, we need to talk. Family meeting, tomorrow." I almost laughed, not from joy but disbelief. They hadn't called for love, they'd called for a reason. And this time I promised myself I wasn't going home empty-handed. Before that wedding day, before the silence hardened inside me, there was Asheville, the house on the hill, with white shutters and too many framed photos of my brother Dorian. His trophies lined the hallway like little altars. My room was smaller, tucked in the back walls, covered with sketches of constellations, and a half-built soundboard I called my studio. At 17, I won the statewide sound design competition. I came home clutching the certificate, hoping for a proud nod or a pat on the back. Dad didn't even look up from the newspaper. "Have you considered law school?" he asked. That was his way of saying congratulations. I tried harder. If praise was currency, I thought I could earn it. I applied for an arts scholarship, poured my soul into the essay. When the letter came full ride, Mom barely smiled. "That's nice," she said, "but don't embarrass your father. Dorian's starting his law degree at Harvard." I laughed, pretending her words didn't sting, but inside something folded in on itself. I started speaking less at dinner. Silence was safer than disappointment. I still remember the night I recorded my first demo. The house was asleep. I layered the sound of crickets and old piano keys into something that felt like breathing. I imagined playing it for them. I never did. A week later, Dad stormed into my room with a financial statement in hand. "Your college fund's been pulled," he said. "We needed it for Dorian's business venture. Family helps family." He said it like an order, not an apology. That same year, Mom started putting together a new family photo album for Thanksgiving. When I saw the proofs, something felt off. In almost every shot, I was on the edge of the frame or cut out completely. "We're just trying to make it look balanced," she said. Balanced. That word tasted like airless rooms and swallowed words. Months later, my invitation to the State Art Showcase came back in the mail unopened. The return label said, "Recipient unknown." Later, I overheard Mom's secretary bragging about intercepting it so the professor wouldn't pressure them to attend. That night, I realized they weren't just ignoring me, they were editing me out. On graduation day, they showed up late, left early to catch a flight to Boston. I stood in the parking lot watching their car disappear. Everyone else had families taking photos. I had the echo of their absence. That summer, I started keeping a notebook, a place to trap the words I never said. On the first page, I wrote, "If they won't give me a frame, I'll build one." Years later, as I sat in my Seattle apartment drafting the structure for the Vail Initiative Trust, that sentence floated back to me. Maybe this was what building my own frame looked like, one forged from silence, bound by proof, and sealed with independence. I hit send on the email to my attorney. Subject line, "Finalize trust structure." Outside the city, lights blurred against the window. I realized then that every quiet night, every clipped photo, every missing face had been preparing me for something larger than their approval. It wasn't revenge I wanted. It was reclamation, the right to decide who I was, even if no one else in my family would say my name out loud. Seattle rains have a way of crawling into your bones. It was the kind of cold that made ambition feel like a fever dream, the kind I carried while trying to build something real out of nothing. Rhea and I lived in a small one-bedroom apartment where the kitchen table doubled as our mixing desk. My laptop was permanently open, wires crawling across the floor like veins. Echo Lens Studios wasn't even a company then, just an idea kept alive by caffeine, sleepless nights, and stubbornness. When I called my parents to share the news of our engagement, I told myself this would be different. Maybe success had softened them. Maybe they'd show up for this one moment. Mom's voice was polite but distant. "Dorian's opening his law office this month," she said. "It's a big milestone for him. The family's busy." I waited for her to add, "But we'll try." She didn't. Dad shouted something from the background about plane tickets to Boston, so I said, "There'll be 3 seats in the front row waiting for you." She didn't answer. The line went quiet, and I could almost hear her thinking of a way to end the call gracefully. When it disconnected, I stared at my reflection in the window and practiced pretending it didn't hurt. I sent them a formal invitation anyway, gold foil lettering, hand-addressed. No reply. Weeks passed. No text, no congratulations, not even a polite excuse. So I threw myself into work instead, because silence feels smaller when you fill it with motion. I stopped checking the mailbox and started chasing clients. The first pitch meeting was in a cafe on Pike Street, 2 investors, both younger than my father, sipping espresso like they already owned the future. I showed them the prototype, a sound module capable of spatial audio reconstruction for VR experiences. They nodded, interested, then asked about my family backing. I said I built it myself. One of them smiled thinly. Ambitious. But investors like a safety net. A week later, they backed out, calling the market too saturated. It wasn't the market, they just didn't believe in me. Bills piled up. My small team of freelancers started drifting away. I spent nights sitting at the kitchen table with Rhea, surrounded by unpaid invoices and empty coffee cups, wondering if maybe my parents had been right that dreaming was a luxury. "We'll figure it out," Rhea said one night, her camera on her lap. "Let me help." She started shooting visuals for our presentation's sleek product shots, short behind-the-scenes reels showing me soldering circuits and editing sound. She said if they can't hear what you're building, they'll see it. That visual campaign saved us. 2 weeks later, a mid-sized tech brand from San Francisco signed a contract worth enough to keep EchoLens alive. Then out of nowhere, I received a leaked email from a contact at a venture fund I'd been chasing. Your profile raised concerns, it read. Attached was a message signed with the initials WV, the same as my father's name, Wendell Vale. The note said I lacked leadership temperament and financial discipline, the kind of language that could only come from someone who thought they owned me. I didn't confront him. I didn't need confirmation. The betrayal felt familiar. A week before the wedding, I texted Mom again. At least call me on the big day. Just once. Hours later, her reply arrived. Don't put your father in a difficult position. That was it. No emoji, no affection. Just another instruction disguised as care. The night before the wedding, I sat alone in our apartment watching rain blur the city lights. The bank had just rejected my business credit application, citing irregular family collateral records. It was the final nail. I decided to separate every asset I owned from anything tied to the Vale name. I stayed up until dawn drafting legal notes for a new structure, a trust that would protect my company from the people who shared my blood. The first line I wrote read, "No funds to direct relatives unless proof of family rehabilitation." I didn't even know what rehabilitation meant yet, but I liked how it sounded like accountability. The wedding went on without them. 3 chairs in the front row stayed empty, untouched, waiting for ghosts who would never arrive. When the MC whispered, "The Vale family has not checked," in a ripple of pity passed through the crowd. I smiled anyway, raised my glass, and toasted to those who showed up. Later, when the lights dimmed, I told myself it was finally over. But the truth is, endings don't arrive with closure. They arrive disguised as silence. Years later, when I posted that photo of the Porsche and my phone lit up with Mom's name, I remembered that night in Seattle. The rain, the rejection, the silence, and realized I'd been writing this confrontation for years. As I closed my laptop and packed my briefcase, I thought tomorrow I'll give those 3 chairs a purpose. Driving through Napa the next afternoon, the air smelled like harvest and cold stone. Rows of grapevines rolled by under a pale sun. I slowed as the old family rental came into view, a white columned house perched like it had something to hide. Mom was already on the porch when I parked. Her eyes flicked straight to the Porsche before landing on me. "You've done well for yourself," she said. I nodded. "Looks that way." Inside, the house felt staged clean to the point of sterility. The dining room table was set for 4, the scent of lemon polish hanging thick in the air. My father sat at the head posture perfect, the same way he used to sit during his lectures. Dorian lounged beside him, suit-pressed, phone face down. A neat folder waited at my seat, papers stacked with surgical precision. Dad began without preamble. "Your brother's practice has run into a temporary problem. Legal expenses, a property issue. The mortgage is behind and tuition for the twins is overdue. We need to stabilize the situation before it snowballs." I leaned back. "And where do I come in?" Mom clasped her hands together. "We thought since you're doing so well now, maybe you could help, just until things settle." I opened the folder. My name was printed at the bottom of the page under borrower. A space for my signature was already filled in. I stared at it until the edges of the paper blurred. "Who prepared this?" I asked. Dad said Dorian did. "It's standard paperwork. Saves time." That was when I understood I wasn't here to talk. I was here to authorize a bailout. I closed the folder slowly. "You've all been busy," I said. "But there's something I still don't understand." I looked at each of them. "Where were you at my wedding?" The air seemed to freeze. Dorian's jaw tightened. Mom's voice was soft but brittle. It wasn't convenient. Dad added, "It conflicted with a work event." I stood up. Good to know family loyalty has a scheduling system. I placed the folder back on the table. "I'll give you my answer tomorrow." Dad frowned. "Don't be impulsive." I smiled faintly. Trust me, I've been thinking about this for years. As I turned toward the door, Mom called after me. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I looked back once. It's already as hard as it's ever going to get. Outside, the light had begun to fade. I walked past the car, pausing to look at my reflection in the window. Behind me, through the glass, I saw them talking, Mom clutching her purse, Dad gesturing sharply, Dorian shaking his head. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. I could read their lips. If he doesn't sign, we'll find another way. When I got back to my hotel, I placed my briefcase on the desk and opened my laptop. My inbox blinked with an unread message from Naomi Blake, my attorney in Seattle. I typed back, "Need the notarized trust document ready by morning. Include non-inheritance clause." She replied within minutes. "Understood. Meeting scheduled for 2 p.m. Do you want representation present?" I wrote. "No. This time I'll speak for myself." I sat there a long while after sending it, listening to the hum of the mini fridge, the quietest sound in the world. For years, silence had meant powerlessness. But now it felt different, like the pause before a verdict. Tomorrow I'd return to that table with my own set of papers, my own definition of family, and a truth they could no longer rewrite. I wasn't coming to sign anything. I was coming to unwrite every line they'd ever drafted for me. The next day, the sky over Napa was painfully clear, the kind of blue that exposes everything. When I pulled into the driveway, Mom was already waiting at the door, the smell of baked apples wafting from the kitchen. She smiled in that brittle way that never reached her eyes. "I made your favorite," she said, gesturing toward the pie cooling on the counter. It was the same one she used to make whenever she wanted to soften bad news. The air inside felt rehearsed, like a stage set where everyone already knew their lines. Dad sat at the same place as yesterday, posture straight, the folder in front of him freshly aligned. "Let's get this handled quickly," he said. "We'd like the bank to process the paperwork by the end of the week." Dorian leaned back in his chair, phone glowing in his palm. "You don't even need to read it all, Asher. It's just procedure." I placed my briefcase on the table and let the latch click open. "Before we talk about loans," I said quietly, "I'd like you to read something." Mom tilted her head, polite curiosity masking unease. "Another contract, yes," I said, "but not between us." I slid the folder across the table, the title stamped on the first page. The Veil Initiative. $18 million Education and Media Arts Fund. Dorian frowned. "What is this?" "It's where my money went," I said. "To kids like me. Kids who were ignored in their own homes but refused to disappear." Mom's face tightened. "You gave away $18 million to strangers while your own family struggles." "They're not strangers," I said. "They're the people I used to be." Dad's tone sharpened. "This is reckless, Asher. You have responsibilities." To whom, I asked. "The people who pretended I didn't exist." The silence that followed was the kind that reveals more than shouting ever could. I took a small recorder from my briefcase and pressed the button. A red light blinked softly between us. "This conversation," I said evenly, "is being recorded, so we all understand what's being asked today." Dad's eyes narrowed. "You're threatening us." "No," I said, "just making sure I'm not driven by guilt anymore." Dorian slammed his hand on the table, rattling the glasses. "You owe this family. Mom and Dad sacrificed everything for you." I met his stare. "You mean the college fund they emptied to rescue your firm when you were 21? The one I found out about through a bank letter." Mom flinched. "Your father did that to protect the Veil name." Her voice echoed in the stillness, a confession that landed like a verdict. I nodded slowly. Good to know the Veil name had a price tag. For a moment, no one spoke. Then I leaned forward, hands steady. "Family isn't who raised you. It's who doesn't use love as leverage." I gathered my folder and stood up. "I think we're done here." Dorian's phone buzzed. He glanced down, his face paling. "What did you do?" he muttered. Dad turned toward him, confused. "What is it?" But I was already walking away. At the doorway, I paused and looked back. "You said I'd regret it if I walked out years ago," I said. "You were wrong. The only thing I regret is ever waiting for you to change." Outside, the light was blinding. I got into the car, the door shutting out their voices. My father's yell followed me faintly through the glass, something about betrayal, about family. I turned the key and let the engine hum. As the vineyard disappeared behind me, I played an old recording, the first demo I'd ever made at 17. A song built from static rain and breath. If they'd ever listened, maybe things could have been different. That night, I sent a short message to Naomi. "We're done talking. Prepare the filings. Tomorrow will be loud." 2 weeks later, the rain was back in Seattle, smearing the city into shades of silver. From my office on the 21st floor, the river looked like it was dissolving into fog. The inbox on my screen blinked relentlessly, hundreds of messages, some congratulating, some accusing. One subject line caught my eye: "Inquiry on the Vail Initiative Fund, urgent." A journalist had written asking if it was true that the fund was privately financed with $18 million. I typed back, "Yes, it's entirely independent, and it has nothing to do with my family." The story broke within hours. The headline read, "Tech entrepreneur establishes $18 million education trust after family rift." By noon, it was everywhere. That's when the phone started ringing. I recognized the number immediately, Dad's. I let it go to voicemail. An hour later, my receptionist buzzed in. "Mr. Vail, your family is downstairs. They're making a scene." I walked to the window. Down in the lobby, I could see them, Mom waving papers, Dad arguing with security, Dorian red-faced beside them. A cluster of reporters was already forming. "Escort them out," I said calmly, politely. Through the glass walls, I could still hear my mother's voice faintly as she shouted, "You're destroying your own family." I turned to my assistant and said, "No, I'm just refusing to let them keep destroying me." By evening, footage of the confrontation was circulating online. Within hours, the recording from our Napa meeting surfaced. Naomi had submitted it to the court as evidence in a separate financial inquiry. In it, my father's voice was unmistakable. "We invested everything in him. It's time he gives back." That sentence alone was enough to open an investigation into his previous business loans. My family retaliated almost instantly. A post appeared on social media claiming I had used the charity as a front to hide personal assets. I released the audit report the next morning, signed by independent accountants verified by the IRS. Facts travel slower than rumors, but they last longer. Then came the video. My mother sitting in a living room, drenched in perfect lighting, tears, perfectly timed, telling a sympathetic reporter, "We just wanted to reconcile." My son's pride tore us apart. The comments flooded in, half pity, half outrage. That night, I accepted an interview of my own. The host asked if I felt guilty for airing family business in public. I said, "For years, silence was the rule. Silence protected everyone but me. I'm not sorry for surviving loud enough to be heard." The next morning, new reports surfaced. Dorian was under investigation for falsifying signatures on loan documents, mine among them. Another article confirmed what I had always suspected: the mysterious email that cost EchoLens its first investor had been sent from my father's old account. Mom called Rhea next. "Tell him to stop this before it's too late," she begged. I heard Rhea's calm reply through the speakerphone. "He's the only one who ever believed in me. I'm not stopping him from believing in himself." By the end of the week, Naomi sent me a final draft, an official complaint that, if filed, would strip the Vail name of its last legal shield. I read it carefully, every clause, every number. She asked, "Are you sure, Asher? Once you sign, there's no going back." I looked out at the gray river curling beneath the bridge, the city lights flickering like old memories. "I'm sure," I said. "This isn't revenge. It's closure." When the pen touched paper, my hand didn't shake. It felt like the end of a long-held breath. That night, Naomi called. "Get ready," she said. "You'll be testifying. This time justice will sound like your voice." I hung up and walked to the window. The rain slid down in even lines, just like it did years ago in that cramped apartment when I recorded my first demo on borrowed equipment. Back then, I was terrified that no one would ever hear me. Now I knew they finally did. For the first time, silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like peace. November rain slicked the courthouse steps until they shone like glass. Inside, the federal hearing room felt colder than the weather fluorescent lights humming over rows of faces and cameras quietly blinking red. I took my seat at the witness table. Across the aisle, my mother kept her eyes on the floor. My father held himself upright like a statue that refused to crack, and Dorian stared at his hands as if they might confess for him. Naomi sat behind me with her legal pad. Ria's shoulder touched mine, a small anchor in a hard sea. The chair of the panel read the allegations in a measured voice. Wendell Vale and Associates are under inquiry for using the name and identity of Asher Vale in connection with unauthorized loan applications. The words sounded clinical, but they carried years of dinners I didn't speak at and holidays I wasn't photographed in. When they asked me to testify, I stood and the microphone returned my breath to me. I used to think silence was the only way to be loved, I began. All it did was teach the people around me that they could erase me without asking. I handed the clerk a drive. The room filled with the sound from Napa, the scrape of chairs, my father's voice calm and transactional. We invested everything in him. It's time he gives back. The sentence floated there like a signed contract. No one said a word. I looked at the panel. None of us chooses where we start. But we do get to choose how to end a harmful legacy. I'm not asking for them to be punished. I'm asking to stop them from using my name again. I signed the declaration. Naomi slid in front of me, ink catching the light. I hereby renounce any inheritance, and I authorize the freezing of assets held under or tied to the Vale name that depend on my consent, with the intent to transfer any such controllable interest to the Vale Initiative. One member of the panel leaned forward. Mr. Vale, are you certain this effectively severs legal ties with your family? I've already lived without them longer than they know, I said. I'm just making it official. Naomi rose to submit additional records. For the panel's consideration, she said emails originating from the account of Wendell Vale to a venture fund discouraging investment in EchoLens on the basis of personal claims. The header projected onto the monitor. Initials, dates, the route the message took. Evidence has a thin, unforgiving light. Dorian stood before anyone called him, voice raw. It wasn't all him, he said. I used Asher's signature. I told myself it was temporary, and I'd fix it before he noticed. He wiped his face with the back of his hand. I didn't. For a second, the room shrank to the sound of my brother telling a truth that cost him. My father lurched toward the mic. He's doing this for attention. My son wants the headlines. The chair raised a palm. The scope of this inquiry is widening. Financial controls associated with Mr. Wendell Vale are hereby frozen pending review. A murmur moved through the gallery. Naomi touched my elbow and whispered one more item. She addressed the panel again. Independent auditors and a national philanthropy consortium have recognized the Vale Initiative for exemplary clarity in governance. They've selected it for this year's Transparency and Philanthropy honor. The announcement didn't feel like victory. It felt like oxygen. When the gavel tapped, the room exhaled. I turned to leave. My mother's voice followed a thread pulled too tight. You're killing us. I looked at her without anger. No, I'm saving myself. Outside, the rain had thinned to mist, the kind that softens edges. My phone buzzed with an email from the state preliminary approval for the Vale Initiative's first satellite office in New York. Ria squeezed my hand. How do you feel? She asked. Like for the first time, I don't need anyone's permission to exist, I said. Naomi smiled in that quiet way she saves for hard-earned outcomes. Then let's write the next chapter, she said. I stepped out under the gray skylighter, not because I'd won, but because the truth had finally sounded like me. A year later, spring light poured through the glass roof of our new studio in Manhattan and pooled on the floor like warm water. The words on the wall caught it and threw it back. Family isn't who raises you, it's who lifts you. Students moved through the space carrying cables and cameras, arguing softly about framing and levels, the best kind of noise. I walked the room the way you walk a home you built with your hands. Mr. Vale, a girl with teal hair asked, hovering near a mic stand. Am I doing this wrong? I adjusted the height a notch and turned the gain. No. I said, you just need to believe your voice deserves to be heard. She nodded, shoulders settling, and counted herself in. A clean signal bloomed in the monitors. 1 year since the hearing. My parents had moved quietly to Florida. Dorian was donating time in our legal clinic reviewing contracts for first-generation artists who didn't know how to ask for fair terms. I didn't wait for apologies and didn't spend energy on blame. The past was a room I no longer slept in. My phone lit up with a subject line I recognized too well. Family emergency. I opened it. We're struggling. Can we talk? I typed slowly without anger. When you begin family therapy, we can talk. I hit send and felt nothing tear. Boundaries don't roar when they work, they hum. Sunlight shifted across the studio and landed on 3 white chairs in the live room. They weren't empty. 3 scholarship students were hunched over a laptop laughing at a waveform that looked like a skyline. I rested a hand on the wall on the sentence that had become my map. Some families are built, not born. Ria walked in with coffees, handed me one, scanned the room like she was taking a picture only she could see. So she said, "Do you feel back in the frame I thought about Napa, the 3 empty chairs, the way a camera can tell you what's missing as loudly as what's there?" "Not back," I said. I made a new one. My phone buzzed again. A message from Dorian. "Started therapy. If you ever want to listen to that first demo together, I'm ready when you are." I read it twice, felt the door it opened without promising what was behind it. I wrote back one day, "Keep going." Then I slipped the phone in my pocket and crossed the room to check a student's mix. We gathered everyone for a group photo under the glass ceiling. 3-2. The shutter clicked and caught a frame I'd never had before. Faces alight, hands on shoulders, no one missing. That evening I posted it with a caption that didn't need explanation to the family who showed up. The comments stacked beneath it like a choir. "We hear you." I locked the studio and looked up. The building returned the sky in 100 small squares, every pane a piece of something bigger. People say justice is judgment. For me, it was the moment I could say without asking, "I'm here, I'm enough. I don't need to be chosen anymore." The city breathed, and I breathed with it, all the empty seats finally taken. Sometimes stories like mine aren't about revenge, they're about release. I used to think healing would look like a perfect reunion, a table where everyone finally showed up and said they were sorry. But life doesn't always hand out apologies. Sometimes healing is learning to keep the chair empty until someone who deserves it sits down. Sometimes it's realizing that love, when real, doesn't need to be begged for. Looking back, I see that silence wasn't my enemy, it was my rehearsal. Every moment I swallowed my truth became the fuel I needed to finally speak it. The day I walked into that hearing, I didn't go in to win. I went in to stop losing myself. And that, I think, is what justice really means, not proving someone wrong, but proving to yourself that you were right to survive. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that family isn't the people who share your last name. It's the people who make sure you never disappear again. It's your friend who listens when you doubt yourself, your partner who stands beside you when the world turns quiet, your own voice when you decide it finally matters. Every person deserves that kind of family, even if you have to build it from the ground up. And maybe that's what all of this was about. Not the courtroom, not the money, not the past, but the moment I stopped asking to be chosen. I think we all have that moment somewhere inside us, the day we decide to stop auditioning for someone else's approval and start living our truth out loud. The day we stop chasing love and start creating it in the way we show up for others and for ourselves. So if you're watching this, wherever you are, maybe this story is a small reminder you're not invisible. Even when they ignore you, even when your silence feels like a cage, even when the world tells you that your voice doesn't matter, it does. You matter. You always did. And no one has the right to erase you. Tell me where you're watching from tonight. Maybe it's raining where you are, maybe it's quiet, maybe you're sitting alone wondering if someone will ever notice what you've built. I want you to know I see you. We all do. That's why these stories exist, not to reopen wounds, but to remind us that survival can be beautiful too. Drop a simple hi in the comments or tell me where you're listening from. I love seeing how far our stories reach. Every hi reminds me that somewhere out there someone's finding their voice again. And if this story spoke to something inside, you subscribe. Stay. Because this space isn't just about stories of pain, it's about the comeback that follows. It's about people like you and me who were told to stay quiet and decided to speak anyway. It's about turning the empty chairs in our lives into seats for something real, hope, connection, truth. I'm Asher Vale, and this was my story. But maybe in some way it's yours too. Keep listening, keep speaking, and never forget you were never meant to be silent.